So welcome everybody to another exciting SurveyCTO presentation. This is our webinar with the World Bank, where we're going to be learning how to build high frequency check dashboards. We're very excited to have an exciting panel today that includes two researchers from the World Bank, specifically from the DIME group at the World Bank. Users of SurveyCTO for a long time now, and we're excited to learn from them, and for all of you to learn from them as well. My name is Lindo Similani. I am with the marketing team at SurveyCTO. We're super excited to continue having these presentations to give you the opportunity to interact with some of our users who are doing some exciting work and some innovative work. And so I welcome all of you to this exciting webinar. I have a very small role in today's webinar. I will just be doing the quick housekeeping here to get us all acquainted with the platform, and then I will be handing over to Mafia, my colleague, who will then introduce to us our speakers, and then we'll also be engaging with them in our discussion portion later. And so really quickly, let me just put up on my screen some quick information to get everybody acquainted again with the Zoom platform. So the chat is what most of you have already been using to greet us. That's where you can write if you want to engage with other attendees, if you want to share contact information, if you heard something exciting that maybe you want to point out, feel free to use that. There is going to be a poll that my colleague will be launching in just a few minutes. That is just to help us understand your experience with the topic that we're discussing today, and just to give us a sense of where you are in relation to the topic. So please use that to access the poll, and then you can also use that, I believe, to access the results once the poll has been concluded. And then finally, for any questions that you have for the duration of the presentations, please use the Q&A. That's how we will be tracking your questions and making sure that we can answer them properly. So I will be doing some responses in writing, but some of the questions will be addressed by the panelists when we get to the Q&A session. And with that, welcome again, everybody. We're so excited to have all of you. I will hand over now to my colleague, Mafia.
All right, thank you. Thanks so much, Linda, for the introduction. And again, once again, welcome to everybody who has joined us today for this this webinar. My name's Mafia Piri. I am part of the customer success team at Durability. Let me just share my screen quickly. Yeah, so hopefully my screen is visible. But yeah, I'm part of the customer success team at Durability, and I will be the moderator for this particular webinar. We do have two presenters that are joining us today. I will just briefly introduce them, and then I will hand over to them. But before I do that, just some housekeeping, as Linda mentioned earlier. I'm going to have a poll that's running. So I will open that poll now. So as we go through, please feel free to take time to just respond to those answers quickly. We just want to get a sense of where you are at in terms of your data monitoring, which is part of a big part of the discussion that we'll be having today. Later on in our discussion, we'll try and engage a bit more with the results that we have. So our two presenters from the World Bank. The first is Borui-san. Borui is a second-year research assistant at the World Bank's Development Impact Evaluation Unit. Borui provides survey collection and data analysis support for a variety of projects that cover a number of topics, including small firm growth, agricultural technology adoption, job search, and gender biases. Our other presenter will be Erin, Erin Kelley. Erin is an economist in the Development Impact Evaluation Department at the World Bank. In her research, she studies firm growth, refugee welfare, and technology adoption using randomized field experiments. Her ongoing work includes projects in Bangladesh, Kenya, and India. And so we're looking forward to what it is that they have to share with us. So I'll hand over to them and then jump in later on after their presentation in the discussion and in the question and answer sessions. Okay, over to you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Linda. Thank you, Masha. And thank you, everybody, for attending today. This is really exciting for us to be able to share some of the work that we've developed within DIME, and a lot of people within our department deserve a lot of credit for helping us put this together. So let me just share my screen now. Great. So today we're going to spend a lot of time talking about high frequency data checks. And we had a little bit of background as to who we are, but just to give maybe a little bit more. So DIME is a department within the World Bank. Our goal is to generate high quality and operationally relevant data and research to transform development policy. DIME Analytics is a sub-department within DIME. They're hosting a lot of these public goods that DIME tries to create to make research more reproducible, to improve the quality of the research that we do. I link here to a series of public goods that they have made available. And this set of tools that we're going to talk about today is going to be hosted on GitHub as well for all of you to have access to. And I want to take a second to emphasize that the goal for us today is to motivate and provide an overview of what this approach to high frequency checks can do. We only have 40 minutes, so we're not going to be able to go into all of the mechanics of setting one up, but we've designed a step-by-step guide. So we took about a year to design a step-by-step guide that really is supposed to take everybody through all of the steps towards creating one of these high-frequency dashboards. And the motivation for us there was to make it accessible to everybody with varying degrees of coding. In fact, you need very little to no coding to set up a high frequency dashboard. So please check that out at the end. If any of this is going too fast or isn't covering the full range that you were expecting, rest assured that if you go to this link and read through the documentation, hopefully in an afternoon. You know, we've implemented it across a variety of projects with different teams, and each time somebody was starting from scratch, and within an afternoon they were sort of able to get something up and running. So I encourage you to go and take a look at that. And the focus for today really will be to give an overview of what this dashboard is aiming to do, and a flavor for how to set one up. So just by way of a brief motivation, I think all of us here today can acknowledge how important survey data is. In a lot of the contexts where we work, secondary data isn't always accessible. And so if we want to measure the outcomes of a particular program or an intervention, we need to rely on survey data. And, you know, they're both time consuming for respondents and very expensive. So we really want to make sure we get them right. Now, there are a lot of things that we can do to make sure that the data that we receive is of the highest quality. And here I list kind of broadly what we see as being 4 major steps. So the first is making sure that enumerators are trained well. And I think there's other SurveyCTO webinars that are going to talk about that. There's programming the survey well. So over the past couple of years, you know, SurveyCTO has, for example, made a lot of tools available so that we can program the survey really efficiently. We can also do things like back checks. And then finally, we can do things like high frequency checks. So what are high frequency checks? As the name implies, it's checking the data at a very high frequency as it comes in. And that's going to be the focus for today. So how can we perform high frequency checks? So previously, at least in a lot of my projects, I was doing spot checks with code. And depending on the project, depending on whoever was sort of in charge of downloading the data and running the spot checks, the code looked different, the output looked different, and we sort of were reinventing the wheel each time. And that sort of became quite onerous for us. And so what we thought within DIME and within DIME Analytics to do is to design a dashboard. Now, it's quite simple, really. What it is it's taking data from SurveyCTO and publishing it into Google Sheets. And the motivation there was to make it visually appealing for the entire team. So we'll talk about this, and I'll provide an example in a second. But really, all that we're doing is taking all of the data and making it accessible to everybody in the research team. So the enumerators can see what's being completed, the RA, the field coordinator, the PIs, and it allows everybody within the project to bring their own perspective and to flag different things in the data. You know, oftentimes we expect, okay, whoever the RA or whoever the field coordinator is downloading the data, running their spot checks, exporting something, sending it via email, and that just gets a little bit tough and for everybody to keep track of. And so what this is going to do is it's going to allow data to be published in real time, de-identified, of course, in real time to Google Sheets, and allow everybody from the team to see what's going on. So we're going to track a number of outcomes, and this hopefully is familiar to many of us who have done checks in incoming data. So none of these sort of indicators, if you will, are new in and of themselves, but they are, what we've tried to do is make them systematically presented in all of our dashboards. So the first is going to be a tracking tab. It's going to allow us to track the completion of each individual survey as it comes in. The second is going to be a productivity tab. So things like how many surveys are being completed, how many have been consented to, how many have been refused. And then we're going to have what we're calling kind of two quality tabs, two quality indicators. The first is going to be to track distribution. So look at how our data is coming in. What are the mins? What are the maxes? What are the medians? Are they consistent with what we would have thought? And then looking at those distributions across enumerators. And the motivation there is just, you know, we all ask questions a little bit differently. If you've ever asked a survey question before and compared it to how your peer was doing it, there's always a little difference. And so this approach really allows us to see how people are doing things slightly differently and course correct in the duration of the data collection period. So let me take us through just an example of a high-level example of what this looks like. As I said, a lot of this is just bringing visuals to the forefront. So Borui, I'm going to assume that you can see. If not, let me know as I'm switching between. But as I said, in its most simplest form, all the dashboard is doing is publishing data from SurveyCTO in real time into a Google Sheet. So what that allows us to do then is take that raw data and do a number of tracking exercises that the whole team can be aware and follow. So this first tab, as I mentioned, was the tracking tab, this first indicator. So what's visually appealing here is in real time, we can see for each household ID, the survey completion status. And I'll talk about this in a little bit more detail in a few slides. We also are able to do things like productivity tracking. That's what I call the second tab or the second indicator. And so here, as I mentioned, things like number of completed surveys, the completion rate, which you can showcase using either pivot tables or through graphs. This third indicator that I discussed are things like data distribution. So for each question in your survey, we typically do 1 or 2 questions per module. You can look at the mins, the maxes, are there any outliers, and really see whether the incoming data is coming in as you might expect. And then finally, as I mentioned, we can do this breakdown by enumerator to see whether there are differences. And then finally, we won't have time to talk about this today, but you can check it out again in the step-by-step guide and in the GitHub repo. We've included these kind of filter features, and the one that I find most useful is by date, because then you can sort of see differences across time. So if you corrected somebody's methods in day 2, do you see that reflected in day 3, 4, and 5? So before I hand it over to Borui to give us a little bit of a live demo, I just want to take a little bit more time to talk about these indicators. So hopefully what you've seen with the dashboard is kind of a really visually appealing way for everybody within the research team to kind of see what's going on in real time. And it doesn't require somebody sending an email, the email getting lost, the PI not seeing it. And in our case, what we do is we often, within the research team, everybody takes turns on a particular day to look at the dashboard and flag new things that maybe somebody else wouldn't have picked up. So to take each one of the indicators again a little bit more slowly, the first one is, as I mentioned, the tracking tab. And so here, the reason this came to the forefront is because we wanted enumerators to see what was going on a day-to-day. Often when we do high frequency checks, again, it's kind of the survey firm or the field coordinator liaising one-on-one with the enumerators, saying, oh yeah, I'm downloading the data and I can see you haven't completed this. Whereas here, even the enumerators can see exactly what's going on. So we can see that UID 1001 has been completed. And with nice conditional formatting in Excel, that can pop up in red or green or whatever to kind of flag that something has been done or not. So this tracking tab was really meant for kind of downstream, the enumerators, the field coordinators to be able to communicate very clearly on where we're at with the completion rates, which is important. The second indicator, as I alluded to earlier, is this productivity indicator. And here I just wanted to provide an example from one of our surveys where what we have here is the number of completed surveys. And so, when I was looking at this, when Borui was looking at this, we looked and we said, okay, number of completion looks fairly consistent, but hey, maybe enumerator 4 has a slightly, higher number of incomplete surveys. And, this really jumps out with the completion rate. And so that was and this, again, in real time, it's coming in. And so we could quickly communicate to enumerator number 4 and say, hey, can you tell us what's going on here? Are you facing any challenges? Similarly, another dimension of productivity is the number, not just whether a survey was completed, but whether a survey was consented to. And so yet again, you can see enumerator 4, you can see how it jumps out, right? Like he or she or they have a 6% higher rate of respondents saying they're not available at home, which is a little questionable. It's maybe it's normal. Maybe they went to a particular location where everybody was out, but it's useful for us to follow up with enumerator 4 and say, hey, can you just tell us what's going on here? So that's on the productivity side of things. So we've seen how to track individual surveys. We've seen how to track productivity across enumerator. The next one is quality. And so the first thing that we like to see in kind of our quality checks is the data coming in like we would expect? Or if we don't have any expectations, what are we seeing as it comes in? So that we can follow up. We can ask follow-up questions if there's something we're unclear about with how the data, some of the answers are coming in. And so this is just, we can do it via graphs. We can also do it via pivot tables. And so here was a select multiple question where we asked farmers, we were planting 2 sticks to indicate the seed variety that the farmer was planting. And we were curious what other farmers in the village inferred from seeing 2 sticks in their plots. Were they inferring that the farmer was planting a new variety? Were they inferring that an experiment was taking place? And this was a question that a priori we weren't entirely clear on as researchers, what people were learning from seeing 2 sticks in the ground. And so as the data was coming in, we could really learn from the survey data in real time, and whether kind of the distributions made sense to us. And if not, was there anything that we should do to clarify? Now, the second thing that we can do with the quality indicator is check what I'm calling enumerator bias. And what I mean by bias is we all have ways of asking questions. And this is especially true. I've done a lot of work in the Rohingya refugee camps where we ask questions related to psychosocial well-being, which are quite sensitive. And how I answer a question or how I ask a question about depression may be very different from how Borui asks it. And that's something we need to correct for. And so often what we will do is we will look at the distribution of answers by enumerator. So in this case, we were actually asking farmers how familiar they are with a new rice variety on a scale from 1 to 10. And what you can see is this enumerator here has a much higher minimum, right? Everybody's kind of 1, 2. And they also have a relatively high median. And so it's worth us kind of following up with this particular enumerator and seeing how they were asking the question and validating that they were asking it in a way that we expected. So that's kind of an overview of what we do with the dashboard. And let me say again, all of these indicators that we've come up with are things that many of you are probably doing if you're checking survey data. I think the novelty with the high frequency dashboard is doing it in real time in such a way that everybody in the team can see what's going on, and doing it in a way that anybody, no matter their coding background, can set it up from scratch. Now, before I hand it over to Borui, I will just finish off with, you can in principle do everything with a dashboard, and we describe that in our step-by-step guide. But internally as a team, we've decided that there are a few things that we like to check with code. And so the first is, while you could see maximum values and outliers in the dashboard, I showed you that earlier, sometimes creating a list of outliers and outsheeting that so that the enumerators can follow up is often easier with code. So we've provided template code. You should literally be able to download that and run it, and it'll generate that list for you. The other thing that can often be a little bit heavy for a dashboard is if you have a 2-hour survey, creating those tables or graphs of every single variable can be a little heavy for a dashboard. Nobody really has time to go through that. So that's where I said we typically take 1 or 2 important variables per module and look at those distributions to see if the data is coming in like we would expect. So what we've done is, and then what we do at the end of the survey is we download all of the data and we actually produce a document. We typically do it in LaTeX. It can be in Word if you're more comfortable, that literally plots every single variable and shows you those distributions. And so what we've done is we've created template code that shows you how to create a summary stats table, a bar graph, a histogram, and a k-density, so that if you want to look at every single one of your variables, but you don't want to do it in the framework of the dashboard, you can do that as well. So that's it for me. I'm going to pass it over to Borui, who's going to walk us through some of the live demo portion of this talk, where again, I do want to emphasize that if any of this feels too fast or not complete enough, that's just because we don't have unlimited amounts of time today. And I encourage you to go and check out our step-by-step guide that will be available on GitHub and try this out for yourselves.
Hi everyone, I'm Borui, and thank you all again for joining us today. I'm gonna walk you through the high frequency check system that we created and explain some of the key components to it. The diagram here shows the overall process flow that we used when designing our surveys and creating the high frequency dashboards. So there are 3 things that you need to prepare beforehand, and these are a preloaded data set with respondent information, your coded SurveyCTO form, and an empty Google Sheet for your dashboard. So first, we upload our preloaded data into SurveyCTO as a survey data set and attach it to our survey form. This allows us to reference preloaded data inside our survey form. Next, we will go the other direction. We publish submitted survey data back to our preload server data set. In this way, we can turn this static server preload server data set into a dynamic one, and this allows us to monitor survey completion status after each submission and prevent duplicate surveys. Last, we connect our survey form with an external Google Sheet, and in that Google Sheet, we will pre-set up a series of high-frequency checks by using built-in Google Sheet functions. So every time when enumerators submit new surveys, not only the data will be exported directly to the Google Sheet, it will also be processed and analyzed instantly. Next, we will walk through each of these steps and talk about the motivations behind it. As the design of each survey varies hugely, depending on the context and the purposes of the survey, we hope our approaches can be a useful guidance for you to build your own surveys and high-frequency dashboard, and you can customize it based on your requirements and needs. And we're gonna start with the first 3 steps that focus on building the preload server data set. So here is an example of the preload data we used for our surveys. But there are 2 parts to it. First, we have a unique identifier assigned to each respondent. This is the column A. And here we have the associated respondent information. During our data collection, we share the list of UIDs with our enumerators, and the survey form will ask the enumerator to enter the UID of the person that they're about to interview. Then it will use this UID to pull information of the respondent from the preload data and display it to the enumerators for them to confirm. If it is a phone survey, it will then provide the respondent phone number and ask enumerators to call. So this process can help us reduce enumerator errors and protect respondents' privacy. The second part of the preload data is what we call the survey status trackers. So these variables are designed to facilitate our high frequency checks. So the attempt counter variable tracks the number of attempts made by enumerators trying to contact a particular respondent. We allow incomplete submissions, which means if the respondent is busy at the time of the interview and wants to be contacted later, we still want the enumerator to make a submission. So basically the enumerator will submit the survey the way it is, indicating that the respondent is unavailable right now, so we can document and control the number of attempts made by enumerators. The idea is that, like, for example, if the respondent was unavailable to conduct the interview on the first attempt, we want the enumerator to try contacting the respondent again, instead of giving up and moving on to the next one. So similarly, we also do not want enumerators spending too much time trying to contact the same respondent over and over again. The survey will automatically close after a certain number of attempts. The complete status tracker, the complete status variable is a binary indicator that represents whether a survey is completed or not. This variable describes the result of the survey from the perspective of the enumerators. Completed surveys are surveys requiring no further action from the enumerators, regardless of whether the survey is filled out by the respondent or not. In our high frequency checks, this variable is mainly used to monitor like how many surveys are submitted, how many are left, and whether these surveys are being submitted at an expected pace. So if an enumerator starts a survey for a respondent who has already been interviewed, our survey form will capture that and prevents the enumerators from moving forward by using this variable. And the survey result variable describes the outcome of the survey from a researcher's perspective. It checks consent, like whether the respondent agrees to participate and fills out the questionnaire. So this variable is used to calculate the response rate among completed surveys. So based on our setup, a survey can have one of these three outcomes. So green means that the survey is completed, the respondent agrees to participate and answered all the questions. In our system, this survey will be marked as completed and consented. And yellow means that the enumerator either has not started the interview or tried contacting the respondent, but the respondent was not available at that time. The enumerator needs to reach out to the respondent again. And in our system, this survey will be marked as incompleted. And red means that the survey is completed, but the respondent refuses to participate or will never be available again. And this survey will be marked as completed, but not responded. So now comes to the exciting part. We're going to show you how to set up the preload server data set and how our survey status trackers work in practice, particularly on how it captures duplicates. So I have my preloaded data prepared, same as the one I showed you in the slides. I also have my SurveyCTO form. So inside this form, you can see that I created one pair of calculated fields for each of these three status trackers. So the one with the underscore PL suffix are the original values pulled from the preload server dataset. It used the pull data command to reference values from the server dataset. And the other calculated field updates the original value based on the results of the survey. Like for example, the attempt counter starts with a value of 0, and every time when the enumerator opens the survey, it will be increased by 1. And the complete status variable here says if the respondent has filled out the survey or for some reason the respondent cannot complete the survey, this variable will change from 0 to 1. We will not spend too much time on the coding right now, but at the end of our session, we will share instructions explaining how these variables are created. Now back to our console under the design tab. To create a preload server dataset, I'm gonna click on add server dataset And here enter the the name for the data set, preload data Wagner. And I need to select which file I want to upload for my server data set. And I'm gonna select the same Google Sheet I showed you earlier. And here I have created my preload data set, preload server data set, and I'm gonna attach it to my survey form. Click close, and same, I'm gonna publish my survey form back into this preload server data set. I'm gonna select the same survey form again. Under field mapping, I'm gonna select the list of variables that I want to publish back to my preload data. I'm gonna select the UID, the unique identifier assigned to each respondent, and the survey status tracker we created. And here it asks, so here I'm gonna select the UID again. So basically, this tells our survey form that when it publishes new data into the server data set, it should use the UID as the joining key to merge new survey data with the preload data. You can see now my preload data is attached to my survey form, and my survey form is published back to my preload data. If I click on edit, you will see that the 3 status tracker are all in their default value. Let's fill out one survey together, and I will show you how and observe how the survey status tracker gets updated and how it prevents duplicates. Let me click on fill out. So this is the sample survey form. So first it asks for enumerator's name, and then the UID. I'm gonna do 101, and it will pull the respondent information and display the phone number. It will ask if the respondent is available to conduct the survey. If I say no, it will ask me to provide a reason, like why the respondent is unavailable. You can customize the list of the reasons here based on the context of your survey. But the idea here is that if I select reasons such as no one answers the phone, which means the respondent is unavailable now, but it could be available in the future, it will ask the enumerator to select a next call date for the respondent. For the respondent, and at the end of the survey, we will remind the enumerator that this survey is not completed, and we need to call back to the respondent again at this time. Let's go back. If I select other reasons such as wrong number or the respondent passed away, which means the respondent will never be available again, which will never be available. The enumerator do not have to call back again, and the survey will be marked as completed, but not responded. Now let's go back and say the respondent is available to conduct the survey. We will ask for consent to proceed with the survey. If similarly, if the respondent says, no, I do not want to participate, the result of the survey will be completed, but non-responded again. And here you can see the reason also changes based on the survey results. This is another process that we use to reduce enumerator errors. If the respondent agrees to participate, the form will direct to the main survey questions. We only have one question prepared. After filling this out, we see the survey status becomes completed and responded. Let's submit this survey and see how our preload server data sets gets updated and how it helps prevent duplicates. So let me refresh my page. As you can see, for my preload data, if I click on edit, the survey status tracker gets updated for UID 101. And if I try to fill out another survey for the same respondent again, give it 1 minute to load. So if I try to fill out another survey for the same respondent again, it will display this message saying that this survey has already been completed. I cannot go forward anymore. So it prevents enumerators from submitting a duplicate surveys. Okay, so now go back to my slides. So next, we're at this final stage of this process flow diagram, which is publishing survey data to an external Google Sheet and setting up our high frequency dashboard. So similarly to how we publish data to the preload server data set, here we need to select our survey form, the Google Sheet we want to use to create our high frequency checks, and select the list of variables that we want to export. There are two things that we should keep in mind. So one is we need to have a unique identifier assigned to each respondent, and the other is that we should never publish any personally identifiable information to the Google Sheet because the Google Sheet is not encrypted and therefore not secure. Then we will go to our Google Sheet. To set up our high frequency checks, we will use built-in Google Sheet functions such as pivot tables and conditional formatting to create a descriptive statistic tables and data visualizations. The screenshot here shows the village level high frequency check table and the visualization of the completion rate. As what Erin has talked about earlier, you can break down your high frequency checks into respondent level, region level, and enumerator level checks. Now I'm gonna show you how to publish data into Google Sheet and use pivot tables to create high frequency checks. So here I have an empty Google Sheet. I'm gonna copy paste my preloaded data over. This is just so we don't have to publish the same, export the same information again. And I'm gonna remove all PII data. So now back to my SurveyCTO console under export. If I scroll all the way down to the advanced settings, here if I click on configure, it opens the settings for our Google Sheet connection. I'm gonna select the empty Google Sheet I showed you. This should be the one. And same again, under field mapping, you need to select which variables you want to export to the Google Sheet. For simplicity, I'm gonna add all and remove the PII data, which is the respondent name and their phone numbers. And scroll down, we have the same question again, if asking which field we want to use to identify unique records. I'm gonna put in UID. This tells our survey form to use this variable as the merging key when publishing new data to the Google Sheet. And I save my settings. You can see now, if I go to my Google Sheet, if I go to my Google Sheet dashboard, it creates an empty column for each of the values we selected. We can use the pivot table function to pre-set up a high frequency check. I'm gonna select insert pivot table. I'm gonna select all data as my data range and create my pivot table in a new sheet. Gonna rename this to high frequency checks. So this is the basic settings of the pivot table editor. I'm gonna do village level checks. So under rows, I select village. So this is so basically this tells our pivot table to group our data by the village variable. And under values, we will first calculate the total number of surveys for each village by counting the number of unique IDs in each village. I'm gonna do UID and use the count unique function and rename it to total surveys. We can also calculate the number of completed surveys and the completion rate by using the complete status variable we had. So what we need to do here is select the complete status. We first calculate the number of completed survey. And use the complete status variable again to calculate the completion rate. You can also customize your own functions to do more complicated calculations. Like for example, if I want to calculate, I can calculate a consent rate by using the COUNTIF function. So basically, this calculates the number of the total number of consented survey and divided by the total number of completed surveys, and it will give us the consent rate. It shows as error here because right now we don't have any completed surveys, so our denominators are all zeros. The idea here is we can create all kinds of high frequency checks by using the pivot table function. You can also have like enumerator level checks by simply changing the rows from village to enumerators. Enumerator name. Same again, since we do not have any completed survey, we don't have any survey submitted right now, so it's all empty. So now, like, let me quickly fill out another survey, and you can see how the Google Sheet dashboard gets updated. So I'm gonna do survey 102, and this time I'm going to say the respondent is not available because I never heard of this person or it's a wrong number. If I submitted my survey, you can see our Google Sheet, it gets updated immediately for this UID. It fills out all the information, and our pivot table also gets updated instantly. So this allows enumerators and researchers to track the survey completion status and monitor the data collection process. You can also use the conditional formatting command to flag like a potential issue that may happen during the survey collection stage. Like for example, I can select for example, I want to flag all surveys with flag villages with completion rate lower than 50%. So under the conditional formatting settings, I'm gonna select village A to D, and under the format rules, I'm gonna add a customized formula, which is D. You can so basically this tells the conditional form. Basically, this tells Google Sheet to flag rows with completion rate lower than 50. Since right now all of the completion rate is lower than 50, so all 4 villages are being highlighted. If I do lower than 10%, only the later 3 villages are being highlighted. So based on your survey design, your requirements, you can set up all different kinds of high frequency checks. And this is the same dashboard that Erin showed you earlier. So basically, this is what your dashboard would look like after you set up all the high frequency checks. So thank you so much for attending our event and listening. So here are some links to useful resources that we think you might need. The DIME-IE survey kit provides a detailed documentation on everything that we covered today. The SurveyCTO also offers instructions on how to preloading data into a form, how to publish your survey data into the server data set and the Google Sheet. Sorry, here's the link. So thank you so much.
All right, thank you so much, Erin and Borui, for your presentations. I know there was quite a lot to get through. Hopefully, our participants have been able to follow through. For all the participants, I know there've been a lot of questions around whether a recording will be available. Yes, we will have a recording available, and it will be shared to you through the emails that you registered with. So we will be able to share the recording and all documentation related to the discussion that has gone on. Again, we have a Q&A where you can post any questions that you have. But just quickly, we had a poll running. I will end the poll now and just maybe make a quick comment or two about the questions that we had there. So if you look at the results that we had, we can see that about 45% of everybody on the call, at least those that responded to the poll, do some type of high frequency checks, and so hopefully this has been quite helpful for you. It's also good to see that quite a number of you are using these frequency checks, a number of different data monitoring tools within SurveyCTO. I can see a number have used automated quality checks, about 45%, and a lot more have used back checks as part of their monitoring. And for those that might not be aware, automated quality checks is a built-in feature of SurveyCTO that does help you kind of do the things that we have discussed, but from within SurveyCTO. We have quite a number of resources on it in the support center and within our documentation. So you may want to just have a quick review on that. It will help you flag outliers, and you can actually receive emails that kind of alert you to these things. Obviously, with what we have learned today, you can actually extend that functionality to do a lot more using high frequency dashboards like have been shared with us. So before we open up into all the Q&A, so maybe just a quick question for you, Borui and Erin. I think one of the things that you've highlighted is around looking at what enumerators are doing and just keeping track of how they're going around that work. Why is that important? Why is it important to monitor the productivity of enumerators? But generally, what is the role of enumerators ensuring that you have high quality data? So maybe just that as a quick first discussion, and then we can get into the Q&A.
Yeah, no, I think it's a great question. And I think the enumerators are the most, crucial first step of the data collection process. So they are the ones interacting with the respondents. They're making them feel comfortable. They're asking the questions in the way that they were intended. They're providing feedback as to whether or not the questions were well designed. And so what I see this monitoring as doing is supporting them in that effort. We're not trying to take the approach of, oh, someone's not as productive as another, or someone's asking a question a little bit differently. It's more, okay, we see that there are differences in productivity. That might mean that one enumerator is having a more challenging time, and that allows us to follow up in real time. And I think being an enumerator is one of the toughest jobs. If anybody in the room has done it, it's really time consuming. It's often people don't want to sit around for as long as we have them answering surveys. So it's just a really tough job. And so I think we owe it to them to develop tools to support them in that process. And so having a dashboard where they can see, oh yeah, I can see those surveys that I've completed. Oh yeah, you can see I'm also facing issues with my productivity. I'm not getting as many people. I need support on that. That's how I see us helping them in the process, because they are doing the #1 job in terms of interfacing between the research team and the participants in terms of getting the data that we need.
Thank you very much. Yeah, we'll definitely open it up for questions. But maybe before we do that, I just wanted to mention that we've seen quite a number of questions coming. If your question is not attended to, as SurveyCTO, we do have a support center, so you can write to the support center. We'll be able to assist you with any question that you have, in case we don't touch on it here, but especially if it's related to anything about how to go about doing any of the things that have been presented to us. For those that are completely new to SurveyCTO, you haven't used SurveyCTO before, please feel free to get in touch with Maria. Maria is one of our salespeople, and she's happy to help you with getting started, but also answer any questions that you have about how you can get started. We've just touched on enumerators. I do want to give a quick mention to the fact that our next webinar, which will be on the 31st of August, will be focused on a new feature that we've introduced around enumerators. So basically how to track and manage enumerators. As just has been mentioned by Erin, this is something that's very important. So we have thought about ways in which we can try and simplify this. And so make it easier to track enumerators, what they're doing. And so we've added this functionality for those that have updated their SurveyCTO recently. You might have seen something to do with enumerators come in. And so we'll be talking about that. Linda will put a link to this in our chat so we can have a look at it later on. But again, if you have any questions, clarifications, want to know a reminder about this upcoming webinar, you can always reach us on any of those social media platforms.